Good evening, and welcome to What's Your Story? Have we got a story for you tonight? Have you ever heard of Open Hearth? Well, if you haven't, you will. I have a very special guest with me tonight, Miss Marilyn Rossetti. She's going to tell us all about Open Hearth and what you can do to help out. Marilyn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Please begin by telling our audience a bit about yourself. Are you local, born here, went to school here, what?
I was born in Hartford. I presently live in Hartford. Certainly I cross the border often. I went to school in Hartford, and I guess you could say I'm a real Connecticut born and bred.
So are you a Weaver Beaver or a Hartford Owl?
Oh, I was a Buckley Bulldog.
A Buckley Bulldog. How could I forget that? Yeah.
But then I graduated from a lesser-known alternative high school that was there in the 70s called Shanti Alternative High School.
Okay, so you were a Buckley Bulldog.
I was a Bulldog.
Yes, indeedy. So tell me something. Do you remember your high school prom?
You know, because I went to an alternative high school, we did not, and it was the 70s, we didn't have a prom. Oh. We were anti-prom.
You were anti-prom?
Yeah, so I don't remember my prom, even though now, in retrospect, I wish I had a prom.
What was it like growing up in Hartford?
You know, I have very fond memories. Certainly, we were pretty lucky, I think, as kids. You know, growing up on the same street with familiar friends, parents, walking to school, having neighborhood schools, having a neighborhood grocery. Certainly, I felt like we really had a community. And I'm not saying they don't now, but that was my, my perception. And, we were pretty lucky. We were pretty lucky. We, swam in the neighborhood pool at the park. We, walked to school, walked home at lunch, walked back to school. So,
many people don't remember that, but we did used to go home for lunch.
Absolutely.
Didn't we? That's right.
We walked to school in the morning. We came home at lunch. We walked back after lunch. We came home, then we walked back to the park, and then we came back.
Yeah.
And it was up a hill, and we didn't think anything of it.
Yeah. You have siblings, brothers, sisters?
I have an older brother, and I have a younger stepsister.
And your parents?
My mother is still alive, just turned 90.
God bless her.
And both my dad and my stepdad had since passed away.
Okay. All right. Well, what is Open Hearth? What is it? Please let us know from well, first of all, how many years have you been associated with Open Hearth?
I was lucky enough to be hired as the CEO at the Open Hearth in 2011.
Okay.
So going on almost 11 years now.
Okay.
And it's flown by. The Open Hearth is, in a short nutshell, it's
don't make it a short nutshell. Go right ahead.
It's a facility that houses men experiencing homelessness. But
was it always that way?
It was always that. But what more is that? That is just the function of what it does.
Okay.
But the Open Hearth was founded in 1884.
Okay.
And you'd like to think that there isn't a need for something like that after all these years, but unfortunately there is still a need, and our focus is still the same. How do we get a man from homelessness to housed? And as the story goes, there were some wonderful founding fathers in the city of Hartford who started a coffee sandwich kind of place, and every night they'd have to have these guys leave, and they'd say to them, "Why do we have to have you leave? Why don't you want to go on your own?" And they said, because they had nowhere to go. So it went from the Open Hearth reading room, and then for many years it was the Open Hearth mission. And as you can imagine, it was very, fire and brimstone, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And then in the early 30s, 40s, it kind of started to focus on what gets a man in that position. And what we've done, really focused in the last 10 to 15 years, is really focused on recovery. And I say drugs, alcohol, or life.
Yes.
And employment. Those are the two things that will get a man back to permanently housed, with his family, on his own, with friends. And that is really what we do, and we do it well.
Why males? I mean,
well, traditionally it's always been males. There are other institutions in the city that serve women and children, women alone. Unfortunately, there's more a need for males, so there are more beds. But it has been our focus and our mission, and we've just stayed with that.
All right, what does Open Hearth actually do, and how does it do it?
Traditionally, a man will come through our doors through the 211 system. In the state of Connecticut, if you are presently homeless and you're looking for a bed, you have to call 211, which is United Way number,
Okay.
and they will evaluate you, because the goal with homelessness is to divert you. If you are diverted from a homeless facility, you're less likely to get into one, stay one, return to one. So they'll evaluate you by some questions, but if you are deemed appropriate for a facility such as ours, you will come in, you will be assigned a case manager, you will be assigned a bed, you will be assigned a variety of different things, and then you'll start to work on your goals, with the first one being permanent housing. Sometimes people don't have identification, sometimes they haven't worked in a long time, haven't worked at all, haven't worked well, but all the things are put in place working with the case manager and your peers to get back to where you need to be.
And my eligibility is determined exactly how?
There's some criteria questions asked through 211. Do you have anywhere else to go? Have you been sleeping in your car? Are you outside? Or are you from another state? Do you have any income? There's a whole variety of questions, but you're assigned, a number of need by what you are, and then you're put onto a list, and then you'll go into a facility. And there's many across the state. We happen to be in Hartford County, but there's coordinated access networks for people serving people experiencing homelessness throughout the state of Connecticut.
If you could narrow it down, I don't know if you can, what is the single greatest causal factor in somebody, a male, ending up being homeless? Or does it vary? Or
Jim, I wish there was one, because I think it would make it easier to solve the problem.
Yes.
Oftentimes, men come to us with multiple issues. Certainly, the addiction piece I talked to, and again, drugs, alcohol, or abusing life.
Sure.
Lack of a job that pays a living wage. Unfortunately, mental illness. Just inexperience in how to live life. And if it was one of those, and sometimes it is one of those,
yes.
And it's easier to help a man back. But oftentimes it's kind of a combination, because they come to us oftentimes when you burned multiple bridges. When they get to us, people think, well, then we can just do this and they can get back to where they are. If it was easy and the things they could solve easily were solvable, they wouldn't end up with us.
Yeah.
But our goal is then, how do we make somebody successful?
Now, you mentioned a moment ago, each person is assigned to a caseworker. How many caseworkers do you have, and what's the average load?
Depending on, we have a few programs. We have a few programs on how we do have some folks who come through Department of Corrections,
Okay.
directly out of prison, some through DOH, and some that we're funded on our own. But the average caseload is from 10 to, depending on the severity of the person, 10 to 20 folks.
And how many beds do you have available at any time?
Well, we've de-densified in the last 2 years because of the pandemic, but our what's the full load, that's not the word I'm looking for, is 135.
135?
Yep.
And what's the length of stay in your program?
Again, it depends on the program you come through. Some people are going to be able to, let's use an example of someone who's lost their job, are easily employable, just need that next step. They're going to come in, they're going to work through our employment center, our working man center. We have, if anything good has come out of the pandemic, we have more people coming to us saying, do you have any workers that want to get into the employment and paying a higher pay? So someone like that, they could be out in 6 to 8 to 10 weeks. Someone who has multiple issues, identification, needs more than a case manager, and we have hospitals and organizations we work with. If you need a clinical case manager, a social worker, some type of mental health, if you're having a harder time finding employment, if your goal is to, and you're not going to go back maybe with your family or a friend, you're going to go on your own, maybe you're on a waiting list for some type of housing. I think the extreme is 6 to 8 months, but that's the extreme.
What are the qualifications of the caseworkers? Are they social workers themselves, or can I be a caseworker? Or
You know, Jim, I'm glad you asked that question. Certainly, we have some social workers that we partner with. A lot of our staff are former clients. And I think that's really important, because it's one thing for me to say to somebody, the way, you know, I'm a female of a certain age with a certain upbringing, hey, why don't you do this?
Yes.
But when you've lived, when you have a shared lived experience and you have become successful in your work field or in your life,
yes,
and you're able to share that with someone, I think that's so powerful. So it's not that they're not qualified and they don't have credentials and they haven't gone to trainings and classes, but a lot of our case managers presently are either in recovery, have been former clients, both, and I think that's really important. It serves a important message not only to the client but to others.
How much does it cost a man to go through this program? What's the cost?
The cost is the money that we raise. So the average cost, I would say that's hard to say. It depends on what you partake of. But we get some money from the state, like any homeless facility.
Yes.
And then we raise the rest of it ourselves through wonderful people who donate, fundraisers. We have a evening gala event. We have a golf tournament. We've had the golf. We haven't had the other, except just recently after 2 years. We do an annual appeal. We have a social enterprise also, Open Hearth Works, where we have some contracts where the goal being, what we saw, Jim, was oftentimes there were obstacles to employment for men. They had done everything they were supposed to do, and the doors were still shut.
Yes.
And one day, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we said, you know what, it's too bad this happens. We should start our own employment agency, and we did, and it started small, and it's still somewhat small because the pandemic gave us a little blip.
Sure.
But the goal being, we have a couple of contracts right now, but the goal being in 5 years, if there's anybody, man or woman, who says, you know, I really just need that first job or I need that second job, they'll say, go to Open Hearth Works, they'll hire you. Because at the Open Hearth, we say it takes a job to get a job. And oftentimes somebody just needs that first chance. So that Open Hearth Works, which is a social enterprise, which employs people, also generates some revenue for us.
Do you have the old traditional attitude that the clients you're talking about, they just want a free ride, they don't want to work, the negative?
You know, I often tell people tours, I love to give tours of the Open Hearth. And if anybody out in your listening, viewing land wants to come, I welcome that, because oftentimes the myths of who our men are dismissed when people come to our facility. Are there people and are there men over the last 10 or 11 years who are for whatever, don't want to perform to the point of what you can garner from when you're with us? Absolutely. But you know what I say? If they leave and then sometimes they circle back and they leave sometimes on their own, once in a while we have to ask people politely to leave. You know, our goal is, if they come back, is how can we make them successful? Because, you know, it took them a while to get where they are. And I have seen guys who did not perform, who maybe left under the best of circumstances. And I remember asking one guy in particular, you know, I said, what happened? Why did it take, I think it was his second or third time. And he said, I don't know, Marilyn, it just clicked this time. And he's been gone now for some time and he's fine.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Tell us about some of your success stories. Surely in 11 years, you must.
Oh, you know, and I say the success stories make the failures tolerable.
Yeah.
Because when you see a man, I'll use Joe, not his real name. Joe had alienated his family, had been in and out of, you know, prison. You know, the world was etched on his face as far as, you know, physical altercations.
Yes, oh yes.
And you know, Joe, again, it clicked. He was, I remember we were sitting in the dining room and I looked at him and he was almost physically crying. And he's a big burly guy. And I said, what's the matter, Joe? And he said, you know, because he was going to be moving. He had his apartment. His brother had co-signed for him. They had come back together.
Yes.
He said, I've never done this. I'm so nervous. He said, I've never gotten to this point and been okay.
Wow.
And I thought that is something to be nervous about at any age. So I said, but saying to him, we'll always be here, and Joe does come back. Joe comes back. Joe used to want to cook in our kitchen, and we would let him. He makes great cornbread, just FYI. But there are many, many Joes. There's the Randy who I talked about. There's, many guys who, once they embrace what's allowed them, what's given them, but also work on them. We have a lot of groups, not only AA and NA, but also groups where men can share with each other, because I'm told from some of the staff that works with that, it's one thing to have a one-on-one with someone,
yes,
but when men can share together, and again, this is coming from me, but listening to staff, when they can share together similar stories, make themselves vulnerable, learn from each other, that's what we do. We build a community. It's about giving you the tools, certainly around employment and recovery and housing, but we also give you some things that often you haven't had or lived. So we build a community, so you learn to live in a community. And I think that makes people successful.
What are your plans for the future? What do you have big plans on the drawing board, or what are you going to do?
Well, now that the pandemic is waning, do I dare say that?
Do you dare say that? Yes.
Well, now with the pandemic waning, we're going to ramp up Open Hearth Works again. So if you go to our website, www.theopenhearth.org, you can read about it. So we'll ramp up Open Hearth Works, because really employment is the key for anyone who is looking for employment. We're looking at some capital improvements for our building, but we're going to continue to build on what has proved well, and that's the employment piece. We have a robust employment center. Like I said, we call it the Working Man Center. We just got a contract through the state, through another organization, to work with some neighborhoods on neighborhood cleanups, with the goal that it's kind of a stepping stone employment. So you've done this well, then you can go on to bigger employment, but it's a feeder. So then more people come through.
Yeah.
So it's not we don't want stagnancy. We don't want to, this is a job and then you're there. We want people to move on so that they get a better job, better benefits, better pay, and that more people come through. But I think, building on what we do well, and also, we've had 2 years where we have just kind of, status quo.
Yeah, and to maintain.
Yeah, and we haven't really been able to think more and get excited. So now we are starting to think, okay, things have opened back up. You know what I said, for the last 2 years and doing what we did, it was like we were sailing a ship and building at the same time. It was stormy waters, and there were times during the height of this that, I didn't know what would happen. But now we're sailing into some smoother waters.
Why should people support your organization? Why?
Because if you care about someone who, I say, the men at the Open Hearth could be your brother, uncle, son, nephew, have come upon a hard time for whatever reason, but you'd like to think of an organization that moves them either back to where they were, back to where they could be, on to the next level, support us, because we're not just going to house someone. Certainly we do that, but it's not just about being housed. It's about how can you come back to what you need to be to function, be a part of society, give back to society, do all the things that you and I do, pay taxes, complain, live that life. If you want to see a man go from homelessness to housed, homelessness to employed, really embrace their family, themselves, become a functioning part of society, support us.
You said almost like it was a moral thing to want something better for your fellow man.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I'm biased. But I would like to think everybody wants something better for someone who have less. I was always taught that if you see someone with less, you help them. And I think, Jim, most everybody would say that. And for the people in the last 2 years in particular, I will say the generosity of people.
Really?
The outpouring of generosity. At the dark days when I was afraid and nervous and didn't know what we were going to do, the generosity of people really kept us going. So I do know there are people out there who want to help people who are less fortunate. And if you want to know that people are doing it in a way, because everybody wants best bang for their buck, so to speak, right?
Absolutely.
So if you want to know it's being done at a place with rules and outcomes and data, and the goal being for someone to be housed, support us.
Now, tell the viewing audience how they can help you. What exactly do you need at this point in your journey?
Well, we can always use goodwill, but like anybody, we're a business, and we have a budget. And
You're a 501c3?
We're a 501c3.
Okay.
Where you can look us up on guidestar.org. We have a great rating. We have a huge budget, mostly being food, because we serve 3 meals a day, 365 days a year.
Oh boy.
It's a lot of meals, and we're
boy.
serving men. We're not serving little tiny models. So money is first. You know, donations are great, and you can do that right on our website. It takes 5 seconds. Certainly, we love in-kind contributions, toiletries. Every man who comes in is given a bed box, and it has, you know, a sheet and a pillow, but it has because initially someone comes with nothing. Once they are employed or whatever, they buy their own. But you know, it has toothpaste, mouthwash, toothbrush, deodorant, shampoo, those kind of things. We on our website again, it mentions some of the things: towels, washcloths, backpacks, all the things that, you know, a man could use in his journey. But
so tell people where you're located, and you invited people to come and do a tour.
Absolutely.
Where are you located, and how do they contact you?
We are in Hartford, Connecticut, 150 Charter Oak Avenue, 06106. For people who are familiar with Hartford, we're kind of right behind the Candy Cane building.
Okay.
A lot of people are familiar with that building.
Yeah, the Candy Cane.
I can see the Colt Dome from my window, so kind of in that area.
Okay.
And if they want to come for a tour, give me a call.
What's the number?
860-257-5570 is my direct line.
Will you come back sometime in the future and talk to us?
I would love to come back, and I could bring a client with me.
Wow, that would be wonderful. Okay? That's all the time we have for tonight's show. I'd like to thank my very special guest, Marilyn Rossetti from Open Hearth. Everybody has a story. What's your story? Until next time, I'm James Ransom Reed, Jr. Good night.
Welcome, I'm Nick Augustino. I'd like to welcome you to the Clam Box, where we do seafood our way. We got lobster roll, fried clams, fish and chip, fried shrimp, and our famous onion rings. We put a lot of precaution into the safety for you and your family. Not only do we use plexiglass at the cash register and sanitizer, we all wear gloves and we all keep a 6-foot distancing, and everybody must wear a mask. We carry all the options. We got DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, and of course, we got curbside where we bring it right to your car. Online ordering is available at clamboxnewbritain.com or by calling us at 860-357-3118. The Clam Box, 586 West Main Street, New Britain.